As a medical doctor, I'm interested in what happens in people. It's interesting what happens in water and food residues, but really what happens in people. And what I'm really interested in is a research question that I seem to be pioneering and no one else has answered, and that is eating less poison good for you? Now, it seems like that common sense would say, duh, but we actually don't know. No one's ever tested that research question, but it's testable. And that's some of the research I'm trying to do, to find out if eating less poison is good for you. And this month I've just written an article in Organic Gardener magazine, which I call the 10 Toxic Truths. But in summary of that, it used to be thought that the dose makes the poison. 500 years ago, Paracelsus coined that phrase, and as Andre will say, that was revolutionary for 500 years ago. But we now know there are 5 things that make a poison. It's the type of chemical, it's the dose, it's the combination of chemicals, it's the timing. So if you're a fetus or a child, it's different than when you're an adult. And it's your individual risk factors based on your genetic ability to detoxify, based on your nutritional status, based on your life circumstances. So those 5 things come together to make a poison. Yet when they regulate the dosage and the safety dose and the what's the acceptable daily limit or maximum residue level, they do that in animals. They work out the no observable adverse effect limit. They have a safety factor, but it's all based on dose. They don't consider the timing, the combination, or individual factors, and they say that's a safe dose for the whole population to have for the rest of their life. So the question I'm trying to answer in my research is, we see the trajectory of human disease, and Don mentioned it, and Andre's just written an article about the trajectory of human disease we're seeing with ADHD and infertility and cancer and depression, and all the inflammatory bowel, gluten insensitivity, allergies, autism that goes from 1 in 10,000 to 1 in 50 to maybe 1 in 2 in another 10 years or so. So this is the trajectory, but correlation is not causation. So what I'm looking at is, can we have people live what I call a low exposure lifestyle? And it's not just about your pesticides. One of the things that Don didn't mention is glyphosate has also been shown to inhibit your P450 enzymes in your liver, which are responsible for detoxifying other toxic chemicals. So not only does it have its own toxicity, it actually makes any other chemicals that you eat potentially more toxic. And not just that you eat, that you take in through your skin. So we're all bathing and exposed to a sea of endocrine disrupting chemicals in food packaging, in air pollution, in our food with pesticides, in the personal care products we use, in the cleaning products we use, in the soft furnishings and the building products we use. Every part of our life in modern industrial society exposes us to a whole range of environmental chemicals, industrial chemicals, that didn't exist 100 years ago. And we don't start off life clean. These chemicals get passed through the placenta to the newborn fetus, and then they get passed through the breast milk to the infant. So each generation actually builds on the load of the previous generation, and that's where you see these exponential curves in these chronic diseases of modern lifestyle. So, there are some very simple measures you can use to reduce your exposure. Eating organic food is an obvious one. Myself and Lisa Oates, one of my PhD students, showed that 1 week of eating organic food can reduce your organophosphate pesticide levels by 90%. A 90% reduction. But then the regulators will say, well, but there's no health benefit in that. A 90% reduction in your organophosphate levels is not healthy because the current levels are safe, according to the regulators. However, they've never tested that. There's no data to support that. They're not even monitoring the levels in humans in Australia. They monitored it in a guinea pig somewhere and they worked out the no observable effect limit. They said that the safety factor, below that it's safe. So we're trying to research that. But we do know that organophosphates, they're war chemicals. They're based on nerve gas, sarin gas. They're directly neurotoxic. Acetylcholinesterase inhibitors, they make your whole nervous system jumpy, a bit like ADHD. So, is a 90% reduction in organophosphates makes you healthier? It's an answerable research question, although it's remarkable how difficult it is to get funding to answer that. I mean, and this is, as a doctor, there's not a test your doctor can order. As a doctor, I can't just write a blood test and find out what your chemical load is. These are at the moment, they're very expensive tests to do. You need very specialised labs to do it. And as a observer, I mean, I've had a long learning, very steep learning curve about all these toxic chemicals. It seems like there's a conspiracy of silence amongst laboratories around the world to report on human levels of glyphosate, because there's no population data on even the Centre for Disease Control, which measures 300 different chemicals in the American population, don't report on glyphosate. There are a couple of popular studies that were talked about. The Friends of the Earth measured glyphosate levels in Europeans. Mums across America, a group of activist mothers, measured in their own breast milk. They actually ended up finding a lab and paid for it themselves that would do it, and found glyphosate in their breast milk. But in terms of the peer-reviewed medical literature, in terms of reference ranges for the human population of what is the average glyphosate level, we don't know, because no one's monitoring it. So that's some of the questions I'm trying to answer. We're trying to monitor that in children in Victoria. We've just done a study of 25 children. We're trying to expand that. It may be that we'll go to crowdfunding to do that, because we figure people are interested in understanding that, even if the governments and the corporations aren't willing to fund that. People may actually want to know what's in them. And we're using some innovative techniques where we pool urine samples. So, if you can't find out in an individual, you can find out in a group. I'm happy to talk about it later. I think my time's up. Thank you.
I'd just like to say that we're often told we need this industrial agriculture and we need all these chemicals, otherwise we are going to starve, and we are just a bunch of self-satisfied, inner-city, latte-sipping bunch who really don't care about the world. And I think actually, as Andre alluded to, actually the people that feed the world are the small farmers all over the planet who use 30% of the resources, the land, the water, everything, to produce 70% of the food. So I think that we need to really recognise that. And I think that we need to realise that industrial agriculture produces biofuels. That's what it does. Something like half of the corn crop in North America goes to biofuels. And I went to an industry conference where they were talking about really how the easiest market to serve is biofuels, because people are getting picky about what's in my food. Cows, they might complain a bit now and then, so it's easier to supply biofuels. So I just think we need to really think, should the agriculture of the world be feeding cars? Or the alternative is that, talking about climate change as well, we have farmers all over the world who've developed seeds over thousands of years. And Debel Dev in India has made a collection of saving these seeds, and some of the rice seeds that he's rescued, the rice plants can live underwater for several months. They can live in salty water. And what he's saying is, I've collected these from farmers and I'm giving them back. So I think that we need to stop this fear-mongering that unless we just put up with Roundup and GM food and industrial agriculture and spraying everything, we are going to die. We aren't. What we need is a varied diet grown by our farmers. And also the other thing very topical at the moment is all of us now can do something. We can grow a basil plant on our window. We can do a laneway garden, and laneway gardens are very topical in the city of Yarra. People are beginning to grow things, and we need to get behind that. So what I want to talk about really is, one, get rid of the fear. We need to get back to diversity. Look at all of us here. We're all diverse. We all have our different skills. We all have our different passions and our different energies. That's like we need thousands of different seeds. We need billions of different farmers. We need to work together to create a delicious and inspiring diet of wonderful food. And we can do this and nourish ourselves and nourish our culture and have a wonderful future. But what we have to do is honour ourselves and honour each other and honour being part of a matrix. Because what industrial stuff does, it says, it doesn't matter. Open this packet, spray it on, we've got a wonderful seed, just do it. It says it doesn't matter where it is, it doesn't matter what the climate is, it doesn't matter what your children are like, it doesn't matter about anything. Here we have the one answer to everything, and I think we can really understand that we don't have the one answer. What we need is diversity and variety, because that brings us strength. And there was apparently about 100,000 different types of rice in India before the Green Revolution. Some of them were for babies, some of them were for the elderly, some of them were for breastfeeding mothers, some were only grown in one little garden. And then the uniformity comes along, and something like 15 main types of rice are grown. I think we need to understand our genetic heritage. Diversity is strength, sharing and networking is strength. And so what I'm challenging you to do now is, you've heard all this. It's very easy to hear all this and think, oh my goodness, it's all too hard, what can I do? You can do something. You eat every day. You eat every day. You make choices. You talk to other people. You can cook. You can lobby your council. You can support when you do get wonderful councillors doing great things. You can support them. And I was just thinking, when I was listening, there's so many donations to cancer charities. Why, instead of that, why don't we donate to weeds? Donate to have steam weeding. Donate to have organic gardening classes. Donate to have cooking classes. Donate to make sure there's a neighbourhood kitchen, so even if you can't cook, you can go along and someone can teach you. Or, there are all these wonderful initiatives that are going on, and what they're lacking is you. Now, I don't know you individually. Well, some of you I do. But, you all have your own talents and your own skills, and you can share them with each other, because that's what we're here to do. We're here to share our skills and help one another and create something fantastic. And I'm just going to give a plug. You probably saw there's a Madge Talks tour. So a little leaflet that you saw with a pile of radishes. Hopefully you've seen it. Anyway, what's happening is, what we're doing in Madge is we're trying to raise the level of the conversation about what is the connection between food and health and what can we do. So in March, we have Zen Honeycutt, who's one of the founders of Mums Against America, who actually did the breast milk testing. She's going to be here. She's going to talk about what her group's done, what they've found, what she's found out as a mother, who she's linking with across the States. We've also got Dr. Michelle Perot, who is a paediatrician from the US. She has seen children's health decline over 30 years. She is saying basically most of her practice is trying to repair their gut health, because when you repair their gut health, you can overcome a lot of these illnesses. We also have Dr. Michael Antonio, who's from King's College London. He researches gene therapy, so he looks at acquired and inherited genetic illnesses, and he's very good on the science of what this stuff is actually doing to us, to our bodies. So what I'm encouraging you to do is come along and hear these three experts. Hear for yourself, see what you think, make up your own minds. And I think that this is what this whole thing is an invitation to do, is not to just accept it's safe, it's fine, there's a safe level, don't worry, eat up, be quiet. Because that only happens if we don't talk to each other. Because as you've seen, when people start saying, oh, there is an increase in kidney disease, or there is an increase in birth defects, or there is an increase in autism, rather than being shut down and silenced, we need to talk to each other about it. And by doing that, we can network and find out how we can protect our children and how we can protect each other. Okay, thank you.
Steam weed killing in Yarra, we did a trial. How this trial came about is that three mothers came to me one day several years ago and said, they came to me as a counsellor and said that they'd just observed spraying of chemicals in a park where their children were playing. They were very concerned about that. I said I was very concerned about that as well. I had a discussion with the manager of engineering operations, and out of that discussion, we decided to basically do a trial on what are the alternatives. One of the alternatives is using steam to kill weeds. And sometime later I was riding my bike and I got caught behind a truck, and I looked up and saw the sign, the City of Yarra Weed Steam Trial. So currently the City of Yarra sprays herbicides including Roundup on roads, footpaths, laneways and shopping strips, commercial areas, near kindergartens and industrial areas, also in parks and gardens. So we should note, though, I guess, is that we do have some mitigating factors, like you can register, for example, if you don't want outside of your house to be sprayed, and we won't spray that. You're expected to do the weeding yourself. We only do spot weeding, and I've been told that the spraying of chemicals has improved in its delivery of the service. The trial specifically goes to steam applications in an area of North Carlton. It was designed to go for 4 months, but extended to 14 months to achieve sufficient data, because it killed the seed banks, and therefore we had to extend the time for the need for a new steam application. And basically the time extended for that cycle of reapplying the application between 4 to 6 to 8 week cycle. In other words, it worked. But one of the major challenges to the trial was that we have bluestone lanes and there's dirt in a lot of the crevices. So when you go to spray, or when you go to apply the steam application, it takes more time and it's more difficult to apply if you're doing it just to concrete. The major findings is that steam applications mean less chemical spraying. Fairly obvious, but good for the environment and, as we've heard tonight, obviously good for our health. The other advantage of steam cleaning is it can be applied all year round. There's no downtime. Chemical spraying you can only do on windy days or days where there's no wind. Days where there's no wind, I've been told, it stays airborne, so they don't spray on those days. The steam application, therefore, can be applied on a programmatic basis throughout the year, not dependent on weather. I think the most interesting finding is that the steam kills the weed and the seed. Chemical spraying doesn't kill the seed necessarily, and some weeds become resistant to Roundup. The impact is that chemical spraying needs to be done more regularly, steam application be extended out over a lengthier period of time, with obvious cost benefits. But there's the problem, costs. Chemical spraying for our roads and footpaths is approximately $250,000 per year. If we upscale steam applications, that will come to approximately $460,000 per year. The reason is that the treatments take longer and it's more time-consuming to get access under cars, etc., etc. Last year's budget provided $50,000 for steam weed killing, and chemicals are about $250 approximately for chemical spraying on roads, not in parks. The council's strategy for roads is to apply steam applications in sensitive areas, cafes, shopping strips, schools, kindergartens near there, and chemical spraying on roads, bike tracks, commercial and industrial areas. As the steam applications killed seed banks, it's expected that less applications will be needed, and hopefully it can extend steam to the chemical spraying areas. Less chemical spraying, that's our theory. So how do we eliminate chemical spraying by the City of Yarra? In global costs, and these figures I must say are pretty wonky because it's very hard to ascertain some of the costs, particularly in parks, of spraying, but steam for roads and parks together, it's estimated around $600,000 to $800,000. For the use of chemicals, approximately around maybe $4,000 at the most. So as a councillor, I guess in current times, in budget constraints that we're facing today, it's very difficult for me to come up and say, let's eliminate chemical spraying and let's just go straight to steam. We could look at alternatives such as residents doing the weeding. As I said, the register, you're responsible for your own weeding, but I don't believe this could be generalised to our community at the moment. They expect that service to be provided by local government, and they tell us when it's not done well. And council staff weed manually as well. So, I think we can agree that... for time, I think I'll move on a bit. I think we can eliminate chemical spraying, but I think it needs a longer period, maybe a 10-year time period. The trials show that there were less weeds in North Carlton laneways killed because we killed the seed bank, and less visits needed to apply treatment. The cost and need for frequent applications of steam weed killing in sensitive areas will decrease, and we can extend into that other area. But it is expected the cost of chemical spraying will remain cheaper for some time. Steam is more labour intensive, as discussed. But with more initial funding allocated for STEAM, we can reach a tipping point, I hope, by getting on top of the seed banks. That is, the more STEAM applications result in less chemical applications. The strategy should be to strive for the tipping point where STEAM applications significantly, maybe totally, replace chemical spraying. And I think we can do this. As we become more committed to STEAM, the technology of STEAM in its application will improve. What I think we need to do, the question is, how do we get more funding at Council for STEAM weeding? It needs a committed community to convince our council that this is a priority. An initial boost in funding for STEAM applications will result in less funding for those applications in later years due to the effectiveness of STEAM in overcoming the seed banks, a result that chemical spraying can't achieve. I think the City of Yarra needs a strategy. We need to look at the science, particularly after listening tonight. We need the health impacts of chemical spraying understood. We need to examine the ability of STEAM to overwhelm chemical spraying. If that's true, we need to actually look at that in more seriousness. We need to alter our community's consciousness, and we need targets of increasing our weed steaming. We need those targets so that we can actually aim at something. I would be interested in establishing a council residents working party to advise council on how we can achieve or how we can eliminate chemical spraying. You can do this by putting a motion to council, and it would be that if the community is interested, we could set up this working party of community representatives and council officers and councillors. The City of Yarra has provided leadership in many areas, particularly in energy reductions. We had a stretch target we put many years ago, which various people were very critical of, that in 2015 we reduce our greenhouse gases by 50% from the year 2001. We're currently at 43%, and we're still looking at other initiatives. So if we can provide the leadership, and we've achieved reductions that no other council in Australia has done. By that, we've also received the first council to receive certification for One Planet last year, a prestigious international award for environmental sustainability. If we can do this for our energy greenhouse gas targets, I believe we should be able to provide that leadership to eliminate steam, to eliminate chemical spraying and replace it with steam weed spraying. Thank you.
Firstly, a little bit about us. IFOAM, we've actually called it IFOAM Organics International because the International Federation of Organic Agricultural Movements is a mouthful. And also IFOAM, I like it at times because people think I'm the president of IFOAM. Gives me a lot of prestige, but when they find out it's not quite the same, I sort of lose it. So but anyway, Organics International describes who we are. We're the only global umbrella body for the organic sector worldwide. We are a federation, so we're an organisation of organisations. We have just over 800 organisations as members in 125 countries around the world. We represent around 2 million third-party certified organic farmers. The reality is that most of the world's family farmers, the traditional farmers, there's 500 million of them, and most of them are nominally organic, and we're looking at how we include them. The fact is we are really the majority. The paper I want to talk about, we called the Genetically Engineered Crops, Glyphosate and the Deterioration of Health in the United States of America. Nancy did most of the work. She didn't want all the media when it got published, so I put myself, I agreed to be the corresponding author. Normally the lead author does it, but she didn't want to do it, so I've taken that weight off of it. And that's why I'm the one doing all the media on it. She prefers to do the research, and she's just published another very good paper with Stephanie, Dr. Stephanie Sennett on more of this data. But what I'll do is, what I liked about this is that I don't have to get into technical detail. The pictures tell 1,000 stories. So if you look at these graphs, and I'll just explain, the bars are the increases in disease. We got that from reputable sources like the US CDC. This is good data. The green line is what would have been the normal trend line up to about 1996 when something happened. And this is... Have I got a little... here I've got it. What happened then, if you have a look, the red line is glyphosate. But at this point in time in the United States began the genetically engineered crops. The majority of them, as Don said, over 87%, are GM, Roundup ready. They're modified to tolerate glyphosate. And so what you see is a massive exponential increase in glyphosate. So what we're seeing then when we started data mining is we found, in this case, we found 22 diseases. There's more now that are being published in other papers where you can just see that sudden change. Now, one of the things we did, and I won't go into at this stage, is what we did, is Pearson's correlation cofactor actually mathematically look at the probability. And the probabilities that this is random are less than 1 in 100, in some cases less than 1 in 10,000. So I'll just go through. This is liver and bile duct cancer, urinary bladder cancer. That is so obvious. Sorry, I've just lost it now. Let's get that now. Get the right one. You see, actually, the trend was pretty stable, and then suddenly, bang! The correlation. The same thing here. Thyroid cancer. It was stable trend. Suddenly, bang! Up it goes, exponentially. Obesity. And then when people say, "Oh, well, that's because of all the junk food," but what we're actually understanding now with obesity, it's not just that we're eating more junk food. The fact is, and Don was talking about it, and same with Mark, it's endocrine disruption. What we're seeing now, and there's a very good picture here actually. This one here. I like. That's a study looking at BPA, one of the common endocrine disruptors. In this one, oh no, sorry, that's GM. Sorry, it's another one I was thinking of. That's right. That's what's her name's study. No, there's another one like that where you can actually see the difference between two rats. One that's actually been fed an endocrine disruptor has upset their metabolism, and they become obese. Doesn't matter what they eat. The actual metabolism has changed. And I think this is one of the really critical things here. We're facing an obesity epidemic, and it's blaming the victim. Oh, if they only ate less and they didn't eat junk food, it wouldn't be a problem. It's not that simple. We're finding that the whole way the body metabolizes leads to these people having weight gain. They struggle. They do everything they can. But, the endocrine, the disruption to the hormonal system has actually been set at birth. And now we're getting childhood obesity as a result. The other thing that comes with obesity, we know, is type 2 diabetes, which is also an epidemic. We're seeing, the same thing again. This case we've age-adjusted it. Lipoprotein metabolism. To explain that, it's basically this is cholesterol and excessive amounts of lipoprotein. Sorry, I should say excessive amounts of lipoprotein are seen as one of the major factors in cardiac disease. They're seen as one of the major factors in what we call fatty liver syndrome. There's a whole range of problems, and we're seeing the same thing here. End-stage renal death, kidney disease. We've age-adjusted it here because people say, "Oh, people are getting older, so naturally more people are going to get it." So age-adjust it. We can still see the same thing. In fact, what we see was actually declining until glyphosate came in. I'll just continue and do a few more. Intestinal infection. Don was talking all about that, and leaky gut. The number of children with autism. We talked about how that's rising exponentially. You can see it there, and it's rising in line with Roundup. Dementia. And the other one, which we're seeing is similarly, for the same reason, is Alzheimer's. They're all similar. So, look, I just want to end on that. And so what this paper shows is a significant correlation between the increase in glyphosate and GM crops and these diseases. And in the end, what I suppose what we like to say is this, is that people say, oh, look, correlation is not causation. But in this case, when we've actually done very good statistical analysis, showing that in many cases, it's a 1 in 10,000 chance that these things are a coincidence. It would be imprudent not to consider correlation. We've also included many of the studies, a lot that Donna's cited, we've cited in our paper to actually show the actual biochemical roots how this is caused. We have enough data now to show it's not just correlation. We have papers showing this. So we would say that, given that, we need to start researching and doing it properly and not just dismissing it. In the end, I just want to say, if you mentioned my book, I've gone into a lot more detail about a lot of chemicals, but particularly Roundup, with lots of different studies. That's just one little bit of the dangers of Roundup. I can tell you when we look at all the studies, it is the most, glyphosate Roundup is the most dangerous chemical on this planet. It makes DDT look like sugar candy, and it should be banned tomorrow. So thank you.
Yeah, I'm a land use researcher at Friends of the Earth, and for the last decade or so I've been interested in what's happening to waterways across Australia, particularly with pesticides. So I should say from the outset that I look at a host of pesticides, and glyphosate is only one of them, but I just thought I could talk you quickly through some of the issues. In terms of ecological guidelines in Australia, we have what's called the ANZAC guidelines. They're 15 years old, and what you should know is those trigger levels, they're the legal permissible amount of glyphosate that's allowed to go into waterways in different regions in Australia. In most rural areas, the 99% level would suffice, but in urban environments, that level's allowed to go down to 80%, so that the lower Yarra River, for instance, would have a guideline of 3,600 parts per billion, which is absolutely enormous. Under the guidelines, there's no guideline for irrigation water. The ANZAC guidelines regard the hazards to crops from glyphosate as low. There's no guideline for livestock. They claim that the human level will suffice for livestock, and with aquaculture there's no level either. In terms of drinking water, the Australian drinking water guidelines are set by the National Health and Medical Research Council. They regard the safe level of glyphosate in drinking water at 1,000 parts per billion, which is enormous. And they also write that glyphosate is generally not reported in analysis of Australian waterways. Well, I'd argue there that there's not much testing, so how can they make that claim? The other issue I'd like to raise is that in 1980, the safe level for glyphosate in water was 10 times less than it is now. Now, I haven't been able to work out why those levels have changed, but something's gone on in the preceding years to reach a guideline of 1,000. The Australian Drinking Water Guidelines, they have 133 pesticides in the guidelines. There's 31 different guidelines stated for the 133 pesticides, and glyphosate comes in at 27th. And out of the 133 pesticides, it's regarded as it comes in at about 128th, and so because of its high level, that leads to complacency amongst regulators. And this is just a graph showing the different guideline levels for some of the pesticides under the Australian Drinking Water Guidelines. So you've got glyphosate at 1,000, and you've got the old dieldrin or amitrole at under 1. So because of this high level, in Western Australia there's no testing for glyphosate in drinking water. In South Australia there's no testing for glyphosate in drinking water. In Tasmania there's only very limited testing there. In Victoria, half the water authorities test for it and half don't. Melbourne Water started testing in 2008 and they spat the dummy in 2012 and decided not to test anymore. New South Wales and Queensland are different again because local councils generally have the state of water monitoring in drinking water, and glyphosate's rarely tested for there either. I've just got some levels that I've come across over the last few years of what's actually been detected in water supplies in Australia. The highest level I found was in the Wilsons River near Lismore back in 2003. Glyphosate was picked up at about 209 parts per billion. The big problem for me in Victoria is the Broken Creek. We've got 3 towns that rely on that system for drinking water: Nathalia, Namurka and Devonish, and there's been numerous detections of glyphosate in that creek system. Part of the issue there is that glyphosate and 2,4-D and Amatrol are used as weed control in the creek, and I don't think that's a good idea to have that going on in domestic water supplies. It's also been picked up in the Werdy-Bollock channel, which provides drinking water to Geelong, but as far as I know, it didn't get through the taps. It's also been picked up in Launceston from the South Esk River, and it's also been detected at very low rates at the offtake to Sugarloaf Reservoir, which supplies drinking water to about 1.5 million people in Melbourne, in the northern and western suburbs. This is a photo of a piston pump that was taken in East Gippsland. So there's a lot of people out there in rural environments that pump directly from creeks and streams, which means there's no treatment for the water. So I don't know how many people out there would be directly accessing a drinking water from creeks that have been sprayed with glyphosate. It's sort of unknown at the moment, and that would be similar with people who rely on tank water and bore water as well throughout Australia. And in terms of irrigation water, the north of Victoria is it's the largest irrigation area in Australia, and in 2006 there was glyphosate detected at 10,800 parts per billion near Ardmona. And I'm claiming that's actually a world record. I haven't heard of any number that high anywhere, and I don't know what they must have done in terms of weed control, but I imagine it was just poured into the drains. And that's just a photo of Broken Creek. So, there's a whole cocktail of stuff coming down that waterway of concern in northern Victoria. So I just hope that shed a little bit of light on some of the work that we're doing.